what about the more like, I mean, is there interest in the council on some of the like, yeah, I guess broader questions too. Like I want to be really careful now with details, but San Francisco has announced that they're going to start experimenting with the response programs, so that one of many criticisms has been, like a really basic technical thing. Like, why is it that if somebody is having, an emotional or mental issue, why is that a police response? Like, what, why? And so in San Francisco has announced some notion of shifting that a little bit. Is there interest in the council on some of those kind of wider demands?
As far as I've heard, it seems to
Yeah.
me like a lot of the focus has been on cutting the budget and using that funding to like hire more social workers, guidance counselors, school psychologists. But it has been interesting to see what's been happening in other places like Minneapolis and just, the whole conversation there, the council members who want to disband the police department, the schools, ending their contract with the police department. I do think that there are people who want to see something similar happen here in New York. So I think it'll be interesting to see moving forward, like what kinds of things they propose.
Yeah, and I want to add, everybody should watch. We interviewed Councilwoman Shama Sawant on the Jacobin show on Saturday that Ann and I host. And I mean, she's really like, she's actually expressed a lot of skepticism about the idea of like, having a study that goes on for a year and then mothballing it. And she's like in the process right now of, as an example, taking away tear gas from the force. That's something that she's fighting on. So there's a lot of other areas it can go besides some budget cuts. What do educators, especially now where like there's so much question just even about the idea of like the safety of reopening schools for educators, for staff, for children. What is your sense, I guess, in terms of like the budget priorities questions and everything else? Like, the teachers want NYPD in the schools. Like, what's your kind of sense of where teachers fit in this whole conversation?
Right. So yeah, no, actually I did, maybe this was like a weekend or two ago. I did actually go to a march. It was basically a march of parents and students and advocates and educators who were calling for police-free schools. They actually marched from the headquarters of the United Federation of Teachers, the city's teachers union, up to Tweed Courthouse, the DOE's building. And it was, I mean, in the beginning, it was a small crowd, like when they were people were speaking, but the crowd started to grow more and more. And at one point, it seemed like there were hundreds of people there, and there were students, there were parents, and there were teachers who were speaking. And a lot of them, some of them were actually kind of taking aim at the United Federation of Teachers leadership and saying, oh, well, you guys need to do more to support Black Lives Matter Week. And your statement on George Floyd was insufficient. And there was a real, I really got a sense from that particular event that there was a real desire to see police-free schools, to see some changes, to see more social workers, guidance counselors, school psychologists. I know that there's a little bit of variation, as I mentioned before. I'm sure there's some people who are like, they may not want to see police taken out completely. They might want to just see their role reduced. Sure, there are people who still think police should be there, but that maybe there should be more I don't know, like a bit more communication between the school safety agents and the students. But there's definitely a lot of momentum for this across the board. It was a pretty diverse crowd from what I saw. I think people definitely want to see some changes in that regard. And in terms of curriculum too, I mean, I think even for myself, I mean, I know I did a story recently where I kind of talked to students and former de Blasio officials and advocates about this very issue of police in schools, but I did also talk to them about curriculum, and people want to see more. They want this to there's the whole issue of police killing of Black citizens, other people. They want to see that taught in school as well. They want students to learn about this. Like some students even talked to me about having a whole class devoted to it, a class about human rights issues, specifically in the United States. So I definitely think a lot of teachers are interested in seeing more being done, not just about the school safety agents, but just about curriculum for students to learn about this and about the history of different communities.
What about that surge specifically in student activism?
I'm sorry?
What about the surge? I'm sorry. What about the surge specifically of student activism, like
Oh,
the
yeah.
role that students are playing in it?
Oh yeah, and it's a good question, and I think students are definitely at the forefront of this. There has been, I mean, it's, I guess student activism is something that has always been present in history. But I think kind of speaking specifically about recent events, yeah, I mean, I think you know, they've been calling for police to be out of schools or to be reduced for a long time. The student activists have been vocal on other issues too, like school integration and, you know, this issue of you know, discrimination in admissions process, schools that screen for students. I think across the board, we've been seeing students going out and protesting, holding sit-ins over racism and discrimination happening in their schools. And on this issue, yeah, I mean, that, you know, there were so many students at that particular march. I interviewed some of them, and actually one of them, her name was Rain Hawkins. She is a student at the James Baldwin School, a transfer school in a transfer high school in Manhattan. And I talked to her before the march, and she was saying that, you know, at the end of the day, this is an issue that affects us everyday people, not elected officials. We're the ones that make this city run. We have to have a say in where what the money is being used for, where the funding is going. So I think students are definitely at the forefront of this, and even the advocates I've spoken with have said that as well. And they're very plugged into this. The students I interviewed for my story, some of them were like, well, my parents aren't allowing me to go out to the protest, but I've been calling elected officials. I've been phone banking. I've been telling them to, like, you know, get on board with repealing 50A and support this, you know, chokehold bill. So they also said, well, we're sharing videos of what's occurring on the ground. So across the board, students have definitely been leading these conversations.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.